Hello. Testing. Guys, good morning. Caffeine, as always. You know what? Let's move this around. Yeah, let's get the Nintendo one. I feel like that Erica name always pops out in my videos. Up, but the mic. There you go. Nintendo. Fuck this mic. There you go. Thumbnail pick. Alright, welcome back to Joe's tutorial editing help and stuff. I'm gonna teach you something. I just started editing this video. This is a Pause Tech news segment, but the thing is that usually when I start out, one of the first things to do is I just do some color adjustments towards pause video, right? Just to get out of the way before I start editing. Sometimes I do it last, whatever, it doesn't matter, but in this case, I started doing something new that made me want to teach you what I'm doing now, because it's such a game changer for me, right? And that's basically the way how I color correct, right? Now I got Lumetri. It's a window that's in Premiere Pro, right? It may be very similar to whatever you guys are using, if it's DaVinci or Final Cut, whatever. The process is still the same because you still have the basic shit to edit, right? To color correct, you got exposure, tint, warmth, sharpness, whatever. You got all that, right? So it doesn't really matter if you don't have this software, but you can still follow along doing the same thing, the same techniques, right? So in this case, I'm using Lumetri because it just does a good job of color correcting for me. It's a lot easier because you use the sliders here, right? But if you don't have this, like I said, you can probably just look up the filters and you can drop in an exposure or temp or tint or whatever. It's the same thing depending on your software, right? But anyways, to start out with, there's a lot of different skills you need to learn if you're working for one person. In this case, I'm working for Paul, right? So I'm the editor. Not only by editing, I can do some visuals. I had to learn how to correct audio. I had to learn how to maybe do a little bit of audio mix, do a little bit of audio mixing. I had to learn how to even being able to talk to the camera, because I pop out in front of his camera every now and then, so learning how to speak, which I know I'm not good at. I'm still working on it, but there's a lot of things that comes along with working with someone like Paul, right? It's a YouTuber guy, right? Major companies, they have a guy that edits and they have another guy that they color correct and so on and so forth. So something when I started color correcting, the first thing I usually do is I'll adjust the exposure, right? Can crank everything up, and then I try to mess around with the tint a bit, trying to make sure everything looks more, I guess, even or whatever. And then I kind of worked my way down, right? But actually I realized that I was going at it the wrong way, right? Because I wasn't liking the results of the way how Paul's videos was looking, right? So looked up a few tutorials and did some practice, and I found out that it's better to work with the shadows first, right? Because the thing is that if I crank everything up in the sense of exposure wise, all I'm doing is I'm washing out a lot of color, right? So the best thing to do is actually adjust your shadows and then work your way up from there, because the shadows, by having that good contrast, it kind of makes your image pop a bit more. You have more of a contrast for your detail, and also the colors to stand out when your shadows are good, right? So in this case, I'm gonna start with the blacks here, right? Now this is my Lumetri scopes. It's usually how I color correct, right? Basically you have the red, green, and blue on top of each other, right? So everything down here is black. So anything that touches this bottom area turns to absolute black, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna crank down the blacks a bit. Use the slider. I'm just gonna crank it down a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit, right? This right here is probably the matte. This area here is his hand. Over here, you got a little bit of shadow, so it's mainly a little bit of black, not too much, right? You probably won't see much of a difference, but you will more down the line. So I'm probably just gonna go a little bit more. When you see a lot of white here in this area, that means you have all the colors being smashed together. Next, I'm going to whites. The whites is basically the top area up here, right? So basically everything that touches up here, say in this case, if I was to smash this point towards the top and it turns to absolute white, it's gonna be this monitor here. That's where you're looking at, right? So if I crank up the whites, just see how it turns white over here? That's this monitor here. Now all the colors are smashed together, so that became absolute white. You kind of see the difference now, see? We're getting somewhere. Alright, good enough. So now I'm gonna mess with the shadows a bit. The shadows, what I do personally is I kind of crank up the shadows. I don't smash it, I don't do that. Bring up the shadows more to brighten it up, just to get some detail. But that's gonna wash out the image a bit, but that's okay. The highlights, it's more about this areas over here. We can either crank that up if you want to a bit, just to brighten the image a bit more. You have more control doing it this way instead of cranking up the exposure, because the exposure just cranks up everything at once, right? By using it, by starting with the blacks and moving your way up here, I feel like you have a lot more control to get finer details out. Contrast, you know, I crank up the contrast a bit, just basically so things can stand out a bit more, right? So I don't go too crazy. And there you go. The exposures, I don't really need to touch it because I already basically adjusted everything I want. Exposures mainly when your image is very, very dark, then you want to crank it up. But for the most part, like to start out with, you want to make sure your image is lit pretty well, right? So far so good, right? I'm already liking the way how it looks. See, that's pretty, you know, plain. Looks flat like it's supposed to be when you're filming, and boom, you're starting to get some detail. All right, we can mess around with the saturation. Maybe you can crank up the saturation a little bit just to get some color back. Not too much, right? You don't need that much. I went up like 5 points by sliding this guy a bit, so nothing too crazy. Now with the white balance temperature, you can actually have in my case, there's a white balance selector, and I can click say like this guy over here and it'll do it for you, but I don't like the results of that because this is not absolute white anyway, so I do this manually. So basically what I do is like, see areas like here, you got a lot of green going on, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm gonna add some more red just to kill the green a little bit, not too much. Then I can add some blue, trying to kill the green. I don't want to be too green. So far so good. All right, I'm already liking that. Maybe add a little bit more contrast, just get things going. So basically that's color correcting. Then you can add the creative where, you know, with, you know, the creative side of me doing what I want. It's basically, I add a little bit of faded film. I just like it, you know, smooths everything out a bit so it's not as harsh. Sharpness, I go to 10 usually. I add some sharpness. Vibrance, this one, you got saturation, which is very intense, and you got vibrance that's a bit more tame when you want to add a little bit more color pop to your image. I usually crank this up to 20. It does like a good job of that. There you go. Let's go back up the picture. Probably reduce the saturation a bit. Drop down the reds a bit more. And sometimes I use the color wheel. I kind of like if the blue with the midtones. In my case, I add a little bit of blue, just kind of like to kill. I'm trying to kill like the green look that he has on him a little bit. And there you go. See, may drop a little bit of the highlights. In this case, I'm gonna drop the saturation a bit down. It looks a lot better. So it looks more, trying to get more natural. I'm not too extreme when it comes to color correcting, color grading, you know. I mean, you can add whatever you want. I mean, in my case with the creative, you can add, you know, a look or something like that. I found like a clean Fuji soft. This is just a creative thing. You can drop this down and you can just, you know, add it a little bit just to give it an extra pop if you want. But, you know, I haven't messed with this too much, to be honest. I don't really get too crazy when it comes to color correcting. I just want to make it look good and crisp as much as I can, and then there you go, right? So anyways, that's pretty much what I'm trying to get at with this video, is that color correcting, from what I recently learned that works better for me now, is that you want to start with your shadows, right? Make sure you add you work with your shadows first. Usually your image looks something like this. It's kind of washed out, right? So you want to do is you want to make sure you like start with your shadows, because that'll help everything to pop a bit more. Get more color information once your shadows are like looking good to start out with, right? They can work your way up from there, right? It looks a lot better so far from my experience, right? So yeah, from that to that, there you go, looking good. Now obviously I gotta mess with this a bit more, but I mean, like, I'm trying to give you like the overall gist of it, that that's how I'm starting to work now. Cool, that looks pretty good. All right, so yeah, that's all I got for you. Simple, quick video. Hope it helps. Thanks for hanging out with me for a bit. Take care and peace.